warm-up problem I asked you to do. And the very first thing, what do we do? What's the very first thing I should do when I'm doing this problem? Before I even put it in the form, I write the form down. Now, what is the name of that form? Point slope form.
I have to write that out.
Yes. Now, why did I want you to write that out? Yeah. Okay. Well, do it for a few more days because you have it memorized for one day, right? Kind of like if I'm playing a game of some sort, I can remember how much money that person has for that one round. But if I ask you that 10 days later, probably not. So this will help put it into long-term memory, not short-term memory. So let's go and fill that in. Y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x minus 9. Now, I do expect that you can multiply the negative 2/3 and the negative 9 by hand. Negative 2 over 3 times negative 9 over 1 is 18 over 3, which is 6. So I get y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x plus 6, then we add 3. So my final answer is negative 2/3 x, 2/3 x plus 9. Any questions there? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do one more in your warm-up before we turn it. Okay? Which is actually just another homework problem. So stay right with your warm-up. And we're going to use 7, negative 4, and my slope is 2/5. I'd like you to take a minute and go ahead and start that problem. So I'm going to start by writing down the form again. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we're going to fill it in. Y minus negative 4 equals 2/5 x minus 7. Oops, need my parentheses there, right? Okay, so now we need to distribute. 2/5 times x gives me 2/5 x. And should I need a calculator to do 2/5 times negative 7? No, you can do the multiplication of fractions by hand. So that is 14 over 5. And since it's a positive times a negative, that'll be a minus sign. And over here, that's going to become y plus 4, right? Now, I need to move that 4 to the other side, so I'm going to subtract 4. So I get y equals 2/5 x. How do I subtract fractions? What do I have to have in order to subtract fractions by hand? Spencer. Okay, so if you don't have one of these calculators at home, you need to do the common denominator. But right now we have a calculator in front of us. Now we've talked about how to do fractions in the calculator before, but we're going to review it one more time. So I need, in my calculator, to do negative 14 over 5 minus 4. The way you type in a fraction is you use a parenthesis. Negative 14 divided by 5 parentheses. Now, if you decide to forget the parentheses, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you remember the parentheses, it works every single time. Okay, so don't chance it, put those parentheses. We're subtracting 4, right? So minus 4. And if I do that, I get negative 6.8. But I don't want a decimal. What do I want? Fraction. So remember we talked about that math key, that's that third key down. We click on it, and then we hit enter twice. And it changes the last thing, whatever it was, to a fraction. Negative 34 over 5. Everybody see how I did that? Now, that was the only one on your homework that had those fractions, right? It was the only one. Now, tomorrow you're getting a worksheet. There's lots of fractions on it. So what do you get to use? You get to use the calculator. Get more comfortable with it, right? All right. At this time, go ahead and start our notes for the day. So turn back to your table of contents. And you're going to write this again, writing equations of lines. So we're actually taking notes exactly on what we did again yesterday, but more in depth. So today we're continuing yesterday's lesson. We're going to continue writing equations of lines. So here's our first problem. Now I'm going to give you 2 points. Instead of giving you a slope and a point or a slope and a y-intercept, I'm going to give you 2 points. So go ahead and write down your 2 key pieces of information, just like yesterday. And what do you think I need to find first before I can do anything? The slope. Go ahead and find the slope between those 2 points. I'm going to actually write down find slope. That way, in case I'm looking back at my notes, maybe in like 4 or 5 weeks, I can remember what I did first, right? Now, I always like to label x1, y1, x2, y2. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So 2 minus 5 over 4 minus 1. Negative 3 over 3, that is negative 1. Raise your hand if you got negative 1. Okay. By the way, you do need to show this work right here. You do need to be able to show this work. If you did not write down the equation, that's fine with me. Mainly because we've done slope now for about a week, right? Most of us have that memorized. Okay. Step 2 is my favorite. Raise your hand if you have a sibling. Brother, sister, almost everybody. All right. How many of you, by a show of hands, have ever asked one of your parents, am I the favorite? I know I am too. I know I am too, Ian, so I understand. But this is where you get to pretend to be a parent. You are a parent of those 2 points, and you get to pick which one is your favorite. So step 2 is pick your favorite point. Pick your favorite point. Okay? And I'll go with Colton. Colton, which one's your favorite? Okay. 1 and 5. That is the point he chose, right? We're going to pretend everybody has that as their favorite point right now. Well, now I've got a point and a slope. What do I get to put them in? Point slope form. Go ahead and do that. Y minus 1. Y minus 5 equals negative 1. X minus 1. Negative x plus 1, add 5. Y equals negative x plus 6. Raise your hand if you got that. I do work fast. You start memorizing stuff, you start going a lot quicker. That's why once you get that formula memorized, it goes a lot faster. But now that I've got my equation, I like to know if I'm right or wrong before I hand in a test. Anybody else? You want to know that you're right before you hand in a test? Yeah. So you know what I do? I like to check it. Now, you don't have to show a check. You don't have to show me what you did. But it's helpful to do it up here. That's fine. That's fine. You can write negative 1x. That'd be okay. All right. So, Colton, your favorite point was 1, 5, right? So I'm going to check it with 4, 2. That means I'm going to plug in 4 for x and see if I get 2 out in my head. Now, I'm not even going to write it down. Negative 4 plus 6 is what number? 2. Okay, it works. Then I know my equation is right. That made that simple, right? And that way I know when I'm handing in my test, oh look, I've got an A, here it is. You just put 100% right on top, I'm done. I could. I could also graph it and see if there's 2 points hit. Now, do I have to graph it by hand? I could graph it where? I could graph it in calculator. And we'll come back to that here in a minute. But here's another one. Here's another one. I want you to go ahead and walk through the steps, and then we'll go over the answer. So, I'm going to start by finding the slope. Let's make sure we did that correctly. So, x1, y1, x2, y2. If you messed up the slope, you should be writing that down, right? That will help you from mixing up parts. Okay? So I get 1 over -6. Raise your hand if you got that. Okay, we're on the right track. Now I've got 2 points here. I've got the first point and I've got the second point. Raise your hand if you use the second point to do this. Okay, that's perfectly fine. I will never use that second point. I will only ever use that first point in this one. And here's why. I don't have a negative number, plus the number 0 makes life much easier. So I'm actually going to use the first one. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So y minus 0 equals -1/6 x minus 3. Y minus 0, that's just y, right? Yeah, okay, y equals -1/6x, -1/6 times -3. That would be 3 over 6, that's 1/2. There's my equation. Okay? Choose the easiest one to do. Now, I just told you I'm going to show you another way to check with this graphing, right? So let's get our calculators, and we're going to type this into our calculator. -1/6x plus 1/2. Okay. So up here, we're going to click on the y equals button. And if there's anything in there, you're going to hit clear. Okay, so watch up here. I'm clicking the button for you. So y equals, and then I cleared anything out. Now I'm typing in -1/6, so what's it have to be in? Exactly, -1 divided by 6. Your x key is right here. Right here. Okay? Plus 1/2. Plus parentheses 1 divided by 2. Now, before you hit graph, okay, my Algebra 3 students love to mess with these calculators, and the windows get way off. In fact, we had a window of 15,000 yesterday. So what you do next is you go to Zoom, and you go down to the one that says Standard. The Standard. Not too far. There we go. That always puts it back to a lovely 10 window. You know how it's like you graph on a 10 by 10 window? That's exactly what it will do for us. And there's my graph. Okay. All right. So what was one of the 2 points? 3, 0. Let's check that out. 1, 2, 3. We'll go over here. 1, 2, 3. Does it look like it's crossing 3, 0? Okay, what was the other point? -3, 1. Does it look like it's touching -3, 1? So we did it right. It's touching those 2 points. We did it right. Okay? All right. So that's the second way to check that. So here's our next one. I'm going to give you the point. Now we're going to deal with parallel and perpendicular. Take a minute. Write down the key information up through letter A. Do not write anything from letter B down yet. So, once again, we're talking parallel. Like we just did on our quiz, right? We talked about parallel, perpendicular, and neither. Well, here we're asked to write the equation parallel to y equals 2x minus 3. What do you know about parallel lines? What do they have in common? They have the same slope. That's right, Cody. Cody, what is the slope of this equation? 2. So the same slope is, yeah. So my m is 2. So I've got a slope and I've got a point. What do I need to put it in? Point slope form. Go ahead and put it into point slope form. So as you guys are still working through that problem, which is perfectly fine, notice that every time I do one of these problems, since I told Hemi, hey, I want to see that equation, I write it down every time, right? I haven't skipped doing that yet. So make sure you're still writing that down, because then when we come back to this in a few months, we remember that equation again. So y minus negative 3 equals 2, x minus 2. So y plus 3 equals 2x minus 4, 2x minus 7. Raise your hand if you got that. Good. All right, go ahead and write down letter B. Go ahead and write down letter B. So now we're going to do the perpendicular line. So Cody told us about parallel lines. They have the same slope. Okay. Raise your hand and tell me about perpendicular lines. Opposite reciprocal. So what's the opposite reciprocal to this one here? Good. So I'm actually just going to write that down. M equals negative 1 over 2. So I've got a slope and I've got a point. Go ahead and put that into your point slope form. Y minus negative 3 again. Negative 1/2 x minus 2. Y plus 3 equals negative 1/2 x. Negative 1/2 times negative 2 over 1 is what number? 2 over 2, which is? All right, so that's a plus 1 right there. We'll subtract 3. And we get y equals negative 1/2 x minus 2. Yeah, well, because a negative times a negative is a positive.
Oh, right there.
Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Well, I guess you need to try these ones on your own, right? So I've got a slightly different one, right? So take a minute, write down everything that you need to for this part here, and then we'll start it. Okay. So I'm trying to write the equation through the point 3, 2. It's parallel to the line that passes through those 2 points. So what do you think I need to do first? Yeah, first thing I need to do is to find the slope between those 2 points. Go ahead and do that. 4 minus negative 1 over 3 minus negative 2, 5 over 5, which is 1, right? Raise your hand if you got 1. Good. Okay. So the parallel slope would be 1. It stays exactly the same. Now I have a slope. What do I do next then if I've got a slope? I need to write an equation. Point slope form, so with what point? I've got 3 of them up there. I'm all confused. With the 3, 2. Back to the original part here. We use the 3, 2. So go ahead and use your point slope form to find that equation. Once you finish that, go ahead and try letter B, the perpendicular. By the way, it's the exact same point, so the slope is still 1. Did that on purpose so you don't have to do as much work, right? All right, so the first equation is you get y equals x minus 1. Okay, I like these ones. They're pretty simple, right? Because the numbers are pretty and whole. All right, So the slope we found for these 2 points was 1. What's the perpendicular slope? -1. So I'm going to write m equals -1. We'll plug that in again. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Y minus 2 equals -1 x minus 3. Y minus 2 equals negative x plus 3. And then I add 2, right? So I get y equals negative x plus 5. Raise your hand if you got that. Good. All right, I've only got one more slide. One more slide and we are done. And here it is. We're going to write the equation, prove the point 5, 2 that's parallel to x equals 2. I didn't give you much to go on there, did I? Take a minute, write down your key information. And these are my favorite because they're actually very simple. What's the slope if it's x equals? Slope is 0 because of poi buck. Oh, buck. Is it 0? It's undefined, right? The slope's undefined, and every undefined slope has to have an equation that starts with what letter? X, right? X. All of them have to start with x in order to have an undefined slope. So any equation that starts with x would be parallel to x. Correct? So x equals 8, x equals 12, x equals negative 47. Well, what does x equal in that point? 5. So the parallel equation would be x equals 5. Notice when there's only one letter, the parallel equation will continue staying with the exact same letter. The exact same letter, right? You okay? Okay, so let's graph it real quick. X equals 2. This is 2, right? So I need a parallel equation that goes through 5, 2. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 is right there. So if I need a parallel equation, it has to be the same way, right? And it goes through 5 again on the x-axis. So that's the second way to look at it, by using the graph. Now, when you're only dealing with one letter, x equals or y equals, it's not a lot of work. In fact, there was no work there, right? I understand that. I know that. Now, perpendicular to x equals 2. Well, x is this way, so perpendicular would have to be this way, which goes through what letter? Goes through the y, right? So perpendicular, I'm going to use the opposite letter. And what does y equal in that point? 2. And that's my equation. There's no work on those. And notice again the graph that Hemi had me draw right here. If I drew a perpendicular line, it's going through what number? 2 on the y-axis. A little tricky. That's why we're going to practice this, whether it's today or tomorrow. Okay, because tonight you have some essential work, of course. So at this time, put a clean sheet of paper. If you can hook your group up, hook them up. Some of you I was able to get paper around to. If not, I'll get you paper tomorrow. At the top, right-hand corner goes your first and last name. If that was in here. Notice that it has to be a number from that point. You mean in this equation? Like right here? Yeah. If this had been a 10, it would still be the exact same equation. So parallel, Hemi, I'm going to use the exact same letter. Perpendicular, I'm going to use the opposite letter. Yes. Yes. Any number they give us. All right. Top right-hand corner goes to first and last name. Underneath there, period 2. And here are your essential word problems. 25 through 28 is all. Those are the parallel perpendicular problems. Then you have 36, 38, and 40, and there's about